Don't make a sound, the doctors had said. And so the house obeyed. Marcus Hale stood in the doorway of his mansion every night listening to the silence he had paid millions to maintain. Silence was supposed to mean safety, control, healing. That's what they told him after the accident, the one that took his wife and left his twin sons Aaron and Eli bound to motorized wheelchairs before they were even old enough to understand loss. The house used to breathe. Now it felt like a tomb. The marble floors were spotless. The air smelled of disinfectant and money. Nurses came and went with soft shoes and colder eyes, speaking in charts and warnings. No excitement, no stimulation, no risks. Aaron and Eli sat side by side each day, staring at screens that played cartoons they no longer watched, their small bodies perfectly positioned, their laughter erased. Marcus believed this was love. He worked harder, earned more, hired better specialists. If control could save his sons, he would master it. If silence could protect them, he would enforce it. Grief had taught him one rule: feel nothing, lose nothing. Then Naomi Brooks arrived. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a nurse. She was a black woman with a soft voice, worn shoes, and eyes that noticed things no report ever mentioned. How Aaron's fingers twitched when music played somewhere far away. How Eli's shoulders tensed when the room went too quiet. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the moment Naomi stepped into that house, something ancient and dangerous followed her in. Hope. And hope in a house built on fear was about to change everything. Naomi Brooks did not arrive with instructions. She arrived with rhythm. On her first morning, Marcus heard it before he saw it. A low hum drifting down the hallway, warm and unafraid. It didn't belong in that house. It wasn't measured or clinical. It wasn't approved by anyone in a white coat. It was the kind of sound people make when they're alone and not trying to survive. Naomi moved through the mansion like someone who wasn't intimidated by its size. She cleaned, yes, but slowly, intentionally. She opened the curtains Marcus always ordered shut, letting sunlight spill across the marble floor like it had been waiting years for permission. She wiped surfaces while humming an old gospel melody, soft but steady, as if reminding the walls what a home used to sound like. She noticed Aaron and Eli immediately, not their wheelchairs, not their medical monitors. Them. "Good morning, my kings," she said gently, crouching to their eye level. Her voice didn't carry pity. It carried expectation. "Y'all ready to supervise me today?" The boys didn't answer. They rarely did. But Aaron's eyes followed her as she moved. Eli's fingers curled slightly around the armrest when she smiled at him. Naomi saw it. She always saw the small things. Instead of turning on the television like the nurses did, Naomi played music from a small speaker she brought in her bag. Nothing loud, just rhythm, just life. She swayed as she cleaned, exaggerating her movements, letting her arms float through the air like she was dancing with something unseen. She wasn't performing. She was inviting. At first, the boys only watched. Then Eli let out a sound, half a breath, half a laugh that startled even him. Naomi froze, eyes wide, as if witnessing a miracle she didn't want to scare away. "Oh," she whispered, smiling. "There you are." She began to dance more openly, then spinning once, twice, her laughter light and real. The house seemed to exhale. Aaron tried to lift his arms awkward and slow, his face tightening with effort. Naomi rushed to him, not to stop him, but to meet him halfway. "That's it," she said softly. "I see you." For the first time in 2 years, the wheelchairs didn't look like cages. They looked like front-row seats to something joyful. The boys started shouting encouragement, their voices rusty but alive. Naomi danced faster, clapping, letting them set the pace, letting them lead. And in that moment, the mansion that had once felt like a mausoleum began quietly, dangerously, to live again. None of them noticed Marcus watching from the hallway. None of them saw the way his hands trembled. Because what Naomi was doing wasn't in any medical file. She wasn't treating bodies. She was waking souls. The leather briefcase slipped from Marcus Hale's hand and hit the marble floor with a dull, forgotten sound. No one heard it. His house was loud. Music pulsed through the living room, bright and reckless, colliding with laughter that didn't belong to this place. Marcus froze in the doorway, one hand still on the doorframe, his mind scrambling to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. He had come home 3 hours early. He had expected the usual scene, dim lights, drawn curtains, the sterile hum of machines, his sons sitting motionless where doctors said they should be. Instead, the room was alive. Naomi Brooks was spinning in the center of the living room, her arms stretched wide, her laughter ringing free. Her cleaning gloves flashed yellow as she turned her movements bold and unashamed, like joy itself had taken physical form. She wasn't cleaning. She was dancing, and she wasn't alone. Aaron and Eli sat by the windows, sunlight pouring over them, like something newly allowed. Their wheelchairs, those expensive, carefully calibrated machines, had become something else entirely. Thrones, front row seats to wonder. Eli's head was thrown back in laughter so raw it shook his chest. Aaron was trying, clumsily, fiercely, to lift his arms and mirror Naomi's movements, his eyes blazing with a light Marcus hadn't seen in 2 years. "Faster!" Eli shouted, his voice cracked from disuse, but alive. "Go faster!" Naomi laughed and spun again, skirt flaring, clapping her hands. "Y'all trying to make me fly," she teased, brushing past them and tapping their hands mid-spin. Marcus's knees weakened. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This was everything he had been warned against. His heart slammed against his ribs as fear surged first, sharp, instinctive. They could fall. They could get hurt. The doctors had been clear: no excitement, no sudden movements, no unnecessary risks. He had built an entire fortress around those rules. Then it happened. As Naomi pushed Eli's wheelchair in a wide, careful arc, Aaron leaned into the turn. Just slightly. Just enough. A movement. A real one. His torso shifted fluid, intentional emotion the best neurologist money could buy had sworn would never return. Marcus's breath caught violently in his throat. His vision blurred. The room tilted. He had been told that part of him is gone forever, and yet there it was, alive, laughing, defying everything Marcus had accepted as final. The music kept playing. Naomi slowed, sensing the shift in the air. She turned. Her eyes met Marcus's. The smile drained from her face. The color left her skin. She stepped back instinctively, hands clasping in front of her apron like a shield. The boys followed her gaze. The moment they saw their father standing there, rigid, unreadable, their laughter died. Aaron's arms fell. Eli straightened still. The room fell silent, heavy, and sudden, as if joy itself had been caught doing something forbidden. And Marcus understood then with a pain sharper than grief. He hadn't just walked in on a rule being broken. He had walked in on a miracle. The silence pressed down on the room like a held breath. Marcus took a step forward, then another. His shoes echoed too loudly on the marble, each sound a warning shot. Naomi didn't move. She stood with her head slightly bowed, hands clasped in front of her, already bracing for what she believed was coming. Termination. Anger. Judgment. She had broken every rule that mattered in this house. "Turn off the music," Marcus said. His voice was low, rougher than he intended. Naomi hurried to the speaker, her hands trembling as she silenced it. The quiet that followed was worse, thick, heavy, unforgiving. "I can explain," she began, her voice unsteady. "We were just—" Marcus lifted a hand. He didn't want excuses. He wanted answers. He looked at the bright yellow gloves, the sweat on her brow, then at his sons, watching him with fear flickering behind their eyes. The light that had been there moments ago was already fading. "Who gave you permission?" he asked, slowly, to move their chairs like that. Naomi swallowed. Then she lifted her chin. "No one, sir," she said, "but someone had to." The words landed hard. Marcus stepped closer, invading her space the way he did in boardrooms when he wanted control. Someone had to risk my son's safety, he said sharply. Do you have any idea how fragile their bodies are, how much those chairs cost? One mistake and... I know, Naomi interrupted, her hands curling into fists inside those ridiculous yellow gloves. I know exactly how fragile they are. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. I read their medical files every night, she continued. I know their diagnoses, their medications, what movements are forbidden, what excitement is too much. I know all of it. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then that makes you reckless. No, she said quietly. It makes me honest. Before Marcus could respond, a small, trembling voice cut through the tension. Please don't fire her, Dad. Eli. Marcus turned, stunned. His son rarely spoke more than a few careful words to him. Eli's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his eyes glassy but determined. We weren't doing anything bad, Eli said. We were happy. Marcus's chest tightened. Then Aaron spoke, his voice raw, furious, in a way Marcus had never heard before. We're tired of sitting still, he cried, all day, every day, watching walls. The nurses don't talk to us, they just leave the TV on. He swallowed hard. Naomi plays with us. She makes us feel like we still have legs. The word struck Marcus like a blow. Naomi dropped to her knees beside Aaron, without thinking, her authority forgotten, her role erased. She wrapped an arm around him, whispering something soft, something grounding. Aaron leaned into her apron, his shoulders shaking. Marcus watched. His sons weren't reaching for him. They were reaching for her. Naomi looked up, then tears streaming freely down her face. You can fire me, she said. I understand the rules. But those boys are starving, sir. Not in their bodies. She placed a hand over her heart. In here. And for the first time since the accident, Marcus felt the walls he had built to survive begin to crack. Marcus Hale turned away first. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it carried the weight of surrender. He dragged a hand through his perfectly styled hair, undoing it as if loosening something that had been clenched for years. The room waited. Naomi held her breath. The boys watched their father, like prey watches weather. I built this house to protect you, Marcus said, finally, his voice quieter now, stripped of command. After your mother died, I promised myself nothing else would be taken from us. Not you, not ever. He looked at Aaron, then Eli, and somewhere along the way he continued swallowing hard. I decided protection meant control. The word tasted bitter. He saw it then clear and undeniable. The way the boy's shoulders had stiffened the moment he entered. How joy had fled the room because of him. How silence followed him like a shadow, not as safety, but as fear. I thought stillness was healing, Marcus said. I thought if I could keep everything calm enough, quiet enough, the pain would eventually disappear. He shook his head slowly. But pain doesn't disappear in silence, Naomi said softly, not defiant now, just honest. Marcus met her eyes. No, he replied, it doesn't. He turned back to his sons and did something he hadn't done in a very long time. He lowered himself to his knees, right there on the marble floor, bringing his face level with theirs. I saw it, he said to Aaron, his voice breaking. The way you moved, I saw it. Aaron's eyes widened, hope flickering dangerously. I did it, Dad, he whispered. I really did. Marcus nodded. Tears blurred his vision. You did. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was listening. Marcus stood slowly and faced Naomi. Every instinct he had built screamed at him to reassert control, to restore order, to push the chaos back out the door. Instead, he exhaled. Go to the kitchen, he said. Naomi stiffened. Sir, make dinner, he continued. They must be starving after all that exercise. It took a second for the words to land. When they did, Naomi's knees nearly buckled. You're not firing me, she asked carefully. Not tonight, Marcus said. Tomorrow we'll talk about boundaries, about safety. He paused, then glanced at his sons who were watching him like the world had just shifted beneath their wheels. And the music, he added quietly. You can keep it on, for now. Naomi smiled through tears. Not wide, not loud, just grateful. When she disappeared into the kitchen, Marcus remained with his sons in the living room. The house still held the echo of laughter, like warmth trapped in the walls. For the first time since his wife died, Marcus understood something terrifying and true. Love wasn't the absence of risk. Love was choosing life even when it scared you. That night, the house didn't return to silence. Not completely. After Aaron and Eli fell asleep too easily, their bodies worn out by something unfamiliar and precious, Marcus found himself unable to rest. He loosened his tie, poured a drink he barely touched, and walked into his study without turning on the overhead lights. Only the glow of the security monitors lit the room pale and unforgiving. Control. That had always been his refuge. He rewound the footage from the living room. There was Naomi earlier that afternoon, entering with her cleaning bucket. He watched her pause when she saw the boys slumped in their chairs, their heads bowed, the room heavy with resignation. He leaned forward as the video played on. She looked around first, instinctively making sure no one was watching. Then she changed, not dramatically, not performatively. She set the bucket down, reached into her bag, and turned on the music. Marcus watched her shoulders loosen, her face soften. He saw her begin to sway, to smile, not at the boys at first, but at the moment itself, as if joy was something she carried whether anyone allowed it or not. She thought she was alone. That realization hit him harder than anything else. She wasn't trying to impress his sons. She wasn't trying to defy him. She wasn't playing a role. She was being real. Marcus replayed the moment Aaron moved again, slowed it down, frame by frame. His throat tightened as the truth settled deep in his chest. Naomi hadn't forced life into his home. She had simply made space for it. His phone buzzed. A message. "Mother, I'll be arriving early tomorrow to inspect the house. Things sound looser than they should be. We'll need to correct that." Marcus closed his eyes. Doña Evelyn Hale had ruled this house long before it was ever his. Order was her religion. Silence her virtue. She believed children should be managed, not indulged. Weakness corrected, not explored. Naomi, her music, her laughter, her audacity would not be tolerated. Marcus looked back at the frozen screen, Naomi laughing with his sons, her arms outstretched light, where there had been none. Two worlds stood on a collision course. He finally understood the cost of his decision that afternoon. By not firing Naomi, he hadn't just bent a rule. He had started a war. Not loud, not yet, but one that would force him to choose between the man he had become to survive and the father his sons were quietly asking him to be. Marcus lifted his glass in the dim light, his reflection fractured across the screens. "Be ready, Naomi," he murmured to the empty room, "because tomorrow the real test begins." The next morning, sunlight crept into the mansion again, but this time it didn't feel like an intruder. Marcus watched Aaron and Eli eat breakfast at the table crumbs on their shirts, music playing softly in the background. They were tired, yes, but it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes from living, not surviving. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a fortress guarding grief. It felt fragile, human, alive. Marcus finally understood what Naomi had shown him without ever preaching it. Money had protected their bodies. Rules had protected his fear. But neither had protected their hearts. Healing, he realized, doesn't always arrive dressed like medicine. Sometimes it comes barefoot, humming softly, willing to risk a little mess so life can breathe again. Sometimes love looks like laughter where silence once ruled. Sometimes it looks like chaos because growth is never neat. He thought of all the years he had confused control with care. How he had believed safety meant shrinking life down until it couldn't hurt him anymore. And how in doing so, he had almost extinguished the very light he was trying to save. Marcus looked at his sons, really looked at them. They didn't need a perfect father. They needed a present one, and in choosing not to silence the music, not to fire the woman who dared to bring joy into a grieving home, Marcus had taken his first real step toward becoming that man. This story reminds us of a hard truth: you can protect someone so much that you suffocate them. Real love isn't just about preventing pain, It's about allowing joy even when joy feels risky. If this story touched something in you, ask yourself, where have I chosen control over connection? Silence over honesty? Safety over life? Because maybe, just maybe, you didn't need to hear this story by accident today. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story hit you the hardest? Like this video if it moved your heart. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what it really means to heal, to love, and to stay. And don't forget, sometimes the music you're afraid of is exactly what can save you.